Principles of Marketing, the Marketing Environment, Chapter 3. This question is based on topics found within the study guide and Kotler and Armstrong. Specifically, it requires students to have a knowledge of material in Chapter 3 of the study guide, dealing with the differences between customers, consumers and clients. The question also requires students to have a knowledge of what risk is and how it arises. This material is covered in Chapters 6 and 7 of the study guide. Finally, this chapter requires a knowledge of how different methods of the promotion mix can be used to overcome customers' perceived risk. This material is covered in Chapter 14 of the 13th edition of Kotler and Armstrong. Consumers are people who actually use a product or service. For example, parents may be the customers who pay for their children's university education, but the children are the actual consumers who receive the education. So customers are people who pay for the product or service. Customers make the decision about what to buy, but the consumer may play a role in advising the customer. Clients typically need to be advised about what service to buy by the marketeer selling that service. Clients are typically people who receive services from providers such as accountants, lawyers, architects, and so on. These providers are also known as professional services firms. People who provide these services are professionals. They need to have the relevant professional qualifications in order to provide that service. Clients come to these people for the specialist knowledge that they have. The power balance is quite different between marketeer and the people who are selling they are selling to, depending on whether the latter are customers or clients. This has an impact on customer perceived risk, which is generally regarded to be higher for professional services. When selling to clients, the power balance is more significant because there is greater information asymmetry between the marketeer and the client. This is typically because the marketeer is selling something about which the client may find it too difficult, expensive, or time-consuming to gather information. The client also suffers from bounded rationality. As a result of these differences, customers of professional services may perceive more risk than customers associate with the products or services that they buy. The reason why clients suffer from bounded rationality is because it may be too difficult and time-consuming for them to know as much about the service as a professional providing it. For example, understanding tax law may require years of study, and keeping up to date with recent changes may be very time-consuming. Such bounded rationality would be less likely to exist with non-professional services. For example, some people may be willing to experiment with having their hair cut and dyed at home, rather than use the services of a hairdresser. In terms of risk, clients may typically have more at stake, V, and the chances of something going wrong may be higher as well, which is P, than the case with the purchasers of ordinary services. Also, there is the possibility that firms can get away with providing and recommending services that it can offer rather than anything that the customer needs. Because customers of professional services perceive more risk, this may lead to them relying more on communications that they consider to be trustworthy, for example, word of mouth, referrals, and recommendations. They may also rely more on editorial and public relations-related publicity than straightforward advertising. If advertising is used, then elements would need to focus on building credibility, for example, using famous celebrities who are known to be honest. Overall, there may be more emphasis on building relationships with existing customers rather than attracting new groups of customers. This question relies on students knowing what a client is. Where students do not know this, the rest of the question becomes very challenging indeed. This question brings together material from a number of different topics, such as services and promotion, and this is a feature of exam questions for Principles of Marketing. Students who are familiar with these topics can score relatively high marks.